Hello, everyone. What a pleasure to be with you this morning for me, and this evening for you. I believe it's 8 o'clock in the evening where you are. So where I come from, that represents a commitment and a sacrifice. So thank you for being here in your evening and investing your time, your valuable time. I want to talk with you a little bit about transformational change and kind of talk in a sort of a wide scope view at first, and then drill down into software agility and business agility as we discuss invitation. Can everyone hear me okay? Is my voice okay? Yeah? Okay, good. So what's the context of this situation we're in the world? Victor mentioned the pandemic. There's a digital revolution that's accelerating at a tremendous pace. We're all wondering what's going to become of robots and AI and space travel and so many other technical things in the biological sciences and also the computer sciences. So we're dealing with a world that's accelerating, and that hits businesses first and individuals first, and then after a delay, government notices it, gets it wrong, passes legislation that's wrong, and then figures it out and makes amendments to legislation, and by then the whole situation's changed again. So this is the world that we're living in, and I have a tool for you to help you cope with this tremendous pace of change. And the tool is very simple. It's an empirical approach called invitation, where you don't impose your will over the situation. Instead, you take what it gives you, and you get aligned on what's happening now instead of what you want to have happen now. And that you kind of just ride the wave instead of trying to make the wave. Okay, so this is the basic idea. Now, we know from complexity science that when you get near a chaotic edge, when you're in complexity, right? This is the Stacy complexity graph, and this is the edge of chaos. Yeah. Okay, when you get up there, what we know for sure is that central planning doesn't work. And something else we know for sure is that what does work is more agency, more authority, and more power to the edge. In other words, more individual agency is what wins this game when we get near the edge of chaos, when we get near that red boundary, okay? So if that's true, then invitation is a tremendous way to trigger a lot of personal agency and see what people are going to do and how they're going to handle it, right? So, for example, the U.S. military has a study that you might not be aware of that's called the Command and Control Agility Study. C2 agility is what it's called. Command and control is abbreviated C2. If you go and you Google C2 agility, you will find, go do it right now. You will find PDFs from the US military discussing military agility. And guess what? The number one factor in complex endeavors is leadership agility. The ability to delegate the appropriate amount of decision making to the edge of the endeavor, okay, and to scale that back when it's less complex and to scale it up when it's more complex. This is the leadership agility, okay? So this is accomplished in our world, in the business world, through leadership invitation. And I want to explain to you a little bit about this leadership invitation idea, right? So this is the structure of a good invitation. It has 4 properties. The first property is a clear goal. So if I invite you to dinner at my house, I need to make it clear to you, you know, it's the goal is find food, find wine, and find conversation, right? This is the attractor, right, in the invitation. The next thing is clear rules, right? So if I invite you to dinner at my house, you know, it's next Thursday, please try to arrive by 6 o'clock. And please expect that we'll be done around 10 o'clock to 10:30. And you may bring a friend, you know? So the rules of the constraints, the boundaries, the guardrails, this is part of a good invitation, right? We tell everyone to arrive at 6 because we're going to start together, you know, this kind of thing, right? So don't really, the not so hidden message is don't accept the invitation unless you agree to the constraints. Okay. And then the next thing in orange, a clear way to process feedback, to gather feedback about how we're doing, right? So everyone wants to experience progress. Progress is a fundamental human need. We need to have this perceived sense of progress if we're going to feel good. So it's important to give people a way to experience progress through some kind of measurement, you know, through the 5 courses for dinner, through the 10 bottles of wine we're going to drink, through time. These are ways to measure progress through time, through task, and so on. So a clear goal, clear rules, a clear way to track progress, and then the big one, opt-in participation. It's okay to say no, and you won't be punished for saying no if you don't come to my dinner. You're still my friend, you know, this kind of thing. So this can be applied to a dinner party. It can also be applied to an organizational party, like an organizational transformation. You know, an organizational transformation is supposed to be pleasant. It's supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to be a little bit stressful, but in a good way, right? The good kind of stress, like that you get if you're a runner or an athlete, where you push yourself just a little more, that kind of stress, right? Where you look forward to going to work each day, where you enjoy playing the game because it's set up this way. Now, what's really funny about this invitation concept, right, is that these 4 properties are the 4 properties of a good game. A good game has a clear goal, clear rules, a way to track progress, and opt-in participation. So gaming and invitation are intimately related. They have the same structure. Okay. Okay. So with that in mind, what we can notice is that most transformational change is poorly structured. It does not have these properties. And that's why it's a crappy game that's not fun to play. So one of the things I want you to know is that you can structure your world according to these 4 properties, and it'll be a lot more fun for everyone involved. Okay. And any good game has opt-in participation, so you invite people. Now, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to open it to a question or two, because I'm probably prompting a lot of questions from people now. And you're probably thinking, oh, I really want to ask this question. Okay. One more thing I want you to know is that leaders are in the business of delegating responsibility and authority. And that's the easy way. When you delegate, you're not really asking for feedback. You're asking for compliance and for action, right? And you're not really asking for feedback. But with invitation, you are, because the response to the invitation is going to give you a lot of actionable feedback as an executive. So let's bottom line this. If I'm an executive and I invite you to an all hands open space event of one day, I need to be engaging in game design thinking. So I have to apply more rigor to my invitations than to my delegations. Delegation is very simple. Inviting is more complicated. Okay. So the question is, why bother? Why bother with something that's harder to do as an executive? Why not just delegate? Be done with it. Here's the reason why. because through the invitation process, you're going to get a lot of feedback that's actionable, that will allow you to gauge where the organization is and what it's ready and willing to do. Remember I said before about, instead of imposing your will on things, how about we just notice what's actually happening now? That's what happens with invitation. You get to gauge and measure and estimate how far the organization can go in the next 90 days or so, okay? The other thing that happens is invitations generate a decision in black. So the invitation in red generates a decision in black. Decisions turn out to be very engaging. You know, you have to think about a decision. You can't just quickly make one, especially if it's important. You have to think about it, don't you? So that engages you in the decision-making process, and that leads to great results when the invitation is aimed at a business goal. You're going to end up with great business results because decisions are engaging, and engaging leads to great results, okay? So these are the two reasons why executives want to mix in invitations with those delegations, okay? And you're not always going to invite. You're only going to invite when things are getting up here, over this dotted red line. When it gets into this area, you've got to trigger more agency. A primary way to do that is through invitations, okay? So before I go too much further into the details, I'd like to take a question or two. If someone has a question on the tip of their tongue that they just must ask right now before we can proceed, then I would love to receive this question. Who has this question?
Yes, anyone with questions, please raise your hand. The Bashis? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question. Daniel, thanks for that. I really liked that handout you showed about great invitations, clear goals, clear rules, clear feedback on progress, and opt-in participation. Wonderful. My question is on the second bullet, which is the clear rules.
Yes.
Who sets those rules? Because if the person who is inviting, they set the rules, the other person might kind of feel that, oh, is this command and control? Am I being asked to? So can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, let's discuss this. First of all, is it the privilege, duty, and honor of executives to set direction? Absolutely, yes. Is it the privilege and the duty of executives to set goals and then towards the direction? Absolutely, yes. We could call that imposition. We could call that mandate. What that really is leadership. The non-negotiables, you know, there's an incoming meteor. We must vacate in the next 3 months or we're going to all be destroyed. Okay, let's all go this way and get away. Okay, so there's that. Like, leadership is supposed to keep people safe and move the business in a direction where it can thrive, where people don't have to be laid off or have a reduction in pay, where we can all thrive. Okay. Is it the duty and obligation and privilege of leadership to set the guardrails, the constraints, the boundaries of what's in and what's out? Absolutely, absolutely, yes. And I have a diagram here. It comes out of the Inviting Leadership book, and it discusses the setting of boundaries, right? So here, the setting is too tight, not enough agency inside the container. It's going to be boring, and I'm going to resent it if I'm an autonomous kind of a person. If I set them too loose, as we see in this example, then everything inside the container is a decision, and that's waste, and it's also very stressful. Okay, but if we get the containment right, if we get the boundary conditions in the constraints and the rules right, then people have freedom in the constraint. Okay, but they're still contained and moving in the direction of the intended, direction. So you'll see me on social media talking about invitation and nothing but invitation, but the reality is that it's nuanced. and that you must set clear goals with clear rules, and those rules are boundaries and constraints. And the executive leadership team has the duty and obligation to design those with game design thinking at an appropriate level of tightness or looseness, right? So over here, this is the ideal. This is too tight, this is too loose, okay? So I hope that answers your question. Do you have a follow-up question?
Thanks, that answers it. Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Very good. And then is there someone else who has a question or two before I go into some detail?
Yes,
hey, Daniel. Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, Victor. When you were talking about those boundaries and constraints, would I be correct in thinking that as you go through, you use the analogy of a game, so let's keep the game analogy.
Yeah.
As you progress through the game and you get to different stages, those boundaries and constraints could change as well.
They could and they should in an agile context, absolutely.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you're bringing this up. You're actually hit a hot button issue with me. And I'm going to show you something. I'm going to put it in the chat. Games, you might have heard of James Carse's book, Finite and Infinite Games. And you also know that there's other kinds of games, like some games are competitive, some are cooperative, and so forth, right? The reality is that there's a certain kind of game where a move is a rule change. And this game is called a mutable game, or I refer to it as a mutable game. I think I might have invented the term. I'm putting the thing into the chat, and I'm also going to share my screen now. Check this out. In Nomic, a move is a rule change. So this is how life actually works. Many of you are married or have been married, had romantic relationships with other people. When that relationship started, there was one set of rules. And then as it progressed through time, there was a new set of rules, okay? I've been married to the same girl for a real long time. And, you know, we have a living room and there's a piece of furniture in that living room. I can't put anything on it. That's an example of a rule that's emerged over time as we live together, right? So totally out. The rules will change over time. And then it's the requirement of the executive leadership to communicate these rule changes. And often the rule changes are going to be crowdsourced, and it's going to be the collective intelligence of the group when we do an inspection point, say every 90 days, and we collectively change those rules in the agreements that we're agreeing to. Right, so the invitation changes over time. That rules segment of the invitation structure. Okay.
Have you
So
tested that table rule recently?
I say that again.
Have you tested that table rule recently?
Which rule?
You can't put anything on the dining room table.
Oh, I test it all the time, and you know, we talk a lot about authority and authorization in my house because it has everything to do with this work, and actually this topic is actually about that. And we joke about how I'm not authorized. I'm deauthorized. In fact, I'm deauthorized from putting anything on that table. If I ever did before, I've been deauthorized or re-deauthorized. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
One final quick question. Will we start to talk about authorization and deauthorization and agency as this topic goes on this evening?
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome.
And all of your impediments, and this is sort of a bald statement. I mean, all, it's easy to refute all because you could find some edge case and say, well, what about this? What about that? So I'm going to say almost all of your impediments are because of skirmishes and conflict at the boundary of decision rights between two roles. That's usually what's going on. So like between a manager and a scrum master, between a scrum master and a team member, between a team member and a product owner, between a product owner and a previous person who used to make product owner decisions and now doesn't. like some kind of program manager or product manager. Most of your impediments are social, and most social impediments are about who decides. And who decides is always about who's authorized to decide.
I'd also add in one there between a team member, what they think they can make decisions about and what they can. And they often make that constraint a lot closer to the bone than it should be.
Absolutely, yes. So here's where this is all going, just so everyone knows where the conversation is going. And I believe we have an hour. Victor, is that right? Okay, so I want to show you something here. This is where we're going to head in this conversation. We're moving in this direction. So leadership invitation is the first thing. This is the keystone pattern. But remember, I told you invitation is more difficult than delegation. It requires more rigor and more game design thinking. These other 7 patterns support the keystone pattern. So for example, if you're going to issue an invitation, you have to be engaging in explicit agreements, boundary management, and clarity of authorization. Those things have to be very clearly communicated, okay? And we'll talk more about the other ones as we go along. But there's the word, there's the A word right there, authorization. So this has everything to do with leadership invitation. I want to add one more thing. When you invite someone to come and do something, they are in charge of the sequence of events in terms of what happens next. You're not authorized anymore to drive the sequence of events. You're waiting on them to respond to your invitation. So it's their timing. It's their yes, it's their no. It's the medium that they choose: text message, face-to-face, telephone, Zoom call, email. That's also all up to them. So the timing, the medium, the content of the message returned, that's all up to them. They're in charge. So when you invite, you're authorizing them to make the next move, and you're not going to make any moves at all until you hear back from them. This is a very important aspect for business agility and agile transformation because it triggers agency and engagement. And if you preempt it and start asking them, like, you know, like say someone says no, and you go and you ask that, you know, you try to find out what the reason is for the no. That's not a very good invitation style. The no is a no. Just accept the no and let's go with the yes people. Okay, so so you know, there's that. Okay, so that's good enough for questions for now, and I'll pause again, you know, maybe in 15 minutes or something. Okay, now I'm going to move a little bit faster, if that's okay with everybody. All right, so we've had this timeline in the Agile world, and this is pretty much like from 2001 to the present state now. And we've had this sequence of events, right? The manifesto, Scrum, then Agile coaching shows up, and then Agile goes mainstream around 2011, and then around 2014, we have this fascination in scaling agility, right? And then 2016, we had this rise of this Agile industrial complex where imposition became something that was being done, and nobody was saying anything about it at all, and it was exponentially growing, right? And then we have pure imposition. In the present day, everything's imposition now. And this is like awful. And I'm going to say something about the Scaled Agile framework. There's nothing inherently evil about the Scaled Agile framework. In fact, they have made a tremendous contribution to the literature of Agile with the tremendous glossary that's on the Scaled Agile website. It's the best Agile glossary I have ever seen. I routinely refer to it, and I think it's absolutely great. Okay. The problem, of course, is that with the dominance of SAFe, because it's in the largest companies, comes a dominance of imposition. You don't see too many SAFe implementations where they're doing it in open space every 90 days, do you? No, you don't see that at all. That's a big problem, not just for SAFe, but for the entire industry as a whole. We're actually stuck in a Groundhog Day. How many people have ever seen the movie Groundhog Day, where the guy lives the same day over and over and over? That's what we're doing right now. We're stuck. Okay. So we need to take a look now at the context. And here's the context. Software agility is a thing. An industry has grown up around it. And now that industry is moving towards the agilization of not software engineering, but the entire business enterprise. Why is this? It has to do with the environment changing, where all the business processes are moving to this zone. Okay, not all of them, but almost all of them. So now there's a kind of demand for a solution. How do we cope in business terms with all this change? The software guys were dealing with empiricism and complexity and chaos for a long time. Now we're dealing with it too. Okay, what do we do? So let's take a look at this. Here's some premise. Here's my basic argument, logical argument. Genuine business agility is impossible to achieve unless an open approach is used. That's my hypothesis. Why? Because imposing self-organization is a contradiction of terms. Agile is inherently about self-management, empiricism, and self-organization. You can't impose self-organization. It doesn't work that way. Self-organization and imposition are polar opposites. They're not even in the same universe. Okay, so they're way at opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And of course, I'm saying that business agility is impossible without an open approach. Why? Because you have to engage people, and mandates kill human engagement. Nobody likes being forced to do anything, you know? The number one way to influence someone, if you go to the psychological literature, it might shock you to know this, but the number one way to persuade someone to your way of thinking is to provide them with a range of options and then tell them that it's their choice. This is what triggers persuasion. This is what people enjoy. If I'm told, I want to do the opposite. But if I'm not told and I'm exercising my agency, then I'm in. Okay? So business agility, which is the ability to respond to change in a business setting, is impossible without open patterns. And it's because of the two whys I just gave you. Therefore, the future of work is based on leadership invitation, not mandates. Why? Because the world we're living in, every aspect of life is moving from the blue to the red. And that's very exciting. It's also very dangerous. Okay? So how are we going to cope with this? And my answer to this question is to support leadership invitation with these other 7 patterns: clarity of authorization, explicit agreement, boundary management. The empirical approach, this is all of Agile, okay? Interaction protocols, these are structured interactions, a kind of emergency procedure for interactions when things get really difficult. We go down to scripted, structured interactions, okay? Whole group process, like open space, get the whole system in the room, tap the collective intelligence of the group, invite agency and engagement. That builds common knowledge, okay? Common knowledge actually is a way to coordinate very, very large groups of people. And I want to go kind of down a side street now for a minute. And I want to share another screen with you. And that screen is a book about a book called Rational Ritual. This is a very interesting book. This book says that people basically can coordinate and through common knowledge. The common knowledge is how you scale. And the primary way to build common knowledge is through, I'll put the link in the chat. It's the primary way to build common knowledge is through public ceremonies. Like an all hands meeting every 3 months or so, where everyone's invited. And the big boss invites everyone, welcomes them, and then we do a kind of ritual, like for example, an open space events. It doesn't necessarily have to be open space. It could be any sort of public ritual that's focused on a task. That builds common knowledge. Common knowledge is useful for scaling not just teams, not just Agile, but to scale. You can actually scale coordination across an entire society, building common knowledge, and that is the premise of the author's book. And whole group process, which we just looked at in the patterns, builds common knowledge. Okay, whole group process builds common knowledge. So I've been using that for 10 years now with clients and collecting video testimonials from them that would just absolutely shock you how positive they are. And some of those are on the Open Leadership Network website. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a couple more links in the chat. One of them is the book, Rational Ritual. I'll put that in there. And another one is the Open Leadership Network's resources. So if we go to the videos and podcast page, if you go look at the videos on this page. These testimonial videos here from actual executives who talk about how these open approaches are helping them to absolutely crush all of their goals by tapping the collective agency and engagement of their workforce through open approaches. And the primary way to build an open approach is to build it on invitation. Okay, so now I want to discuss a little bit about these patterns, right? So let's have a little discussion about those. Okay, I want to pause for a moment though and take a question or two before I go into this detail, because I'm going to get near the end in the next 10 minutes, right? 15 minutes. So I want to pause here and take another question or two about anything that's triggering you to ask a question or make a comment. Is there someone who wants to make a comment? Like maybe Cheryl or Peter or Gretel. Gretel would like to make a comment or ask a question. I don't know. Let's find out.
My comment is just making so much sense, and having been part of probably heard it before, the Suncorp transformation, where everybody was engaged in the conversation, and it just sped everything up because we're all coming from the same place.
Thank you. Well, I've done a whole lot of talking here, so I'm kind of want to catch my breath a little bit. So I'm pausing. There's sort of something in it for me to take a little break here too, you know. Thank you for that, Gretel. And is there anyone else who wants to ask a question or make a comment or have a concern? All right, so we have kind of a quiet group, and that's okay. So now let's have a nice talk about what has to really, really happen. Let's talk about authority and authorization. Let's say that Victor Loke is the CEO of our organization, and that there's 8,000 people in the organization, and 800 of them are software engineers. This is typical in many insurance companies or companies. More and more of their workforce is in tech, right? So 10% is actually kind of low. It could be quite higher. It could be up to 20% in typical companies now. And he invites us to an all hands meeting that lasts one full day. let's say that it's online, but it also has a local aspect. So the local people are going to be in a big room and everyone else around the world will be over Zoom. And the theme is, how can we improve? And then the invitation is about delighting customers and gaining more customers and keeping the customers we already have and gaining new ones by being truly excellent in the delivery of our services and products. How can we improve, right? And he issues that invitation and he waits about 3 weeks. So he puts the invitation out about 3 weeks before the big event. What that's going to do is it's going to trigger a tremendous amount of conversation about what the heck is this meeting the CEO's inviting us into. People discuss it at lunch. They discuss it in the hallways. They ask if you're going. They ask if your boss is going. Now they're focused on the theme. They're focused on the invitation. So you see what Victor has done there is he's triggered a tremendous amount of curiosity. And he got in the head of the whole organization by issuing that invitation. And for 3 weeks, that's all people talk about. That's a big deal, right? So nobody knows what's going to happen at the meeting. Then at the meeting, let's say it's an open space meeting, Victor stands up and he welcomes everyone. He thanks them for coming. He reminds everyone that we're going to have a good time today, but this is real work, and that we are going to produce an output proceedings document, which will be the basis for action over the next 90 days or so, and that everyone's invited to contribute to that. And then during that day, Victor stays around for most of the day, signaling that this is very important to him, that his valuable time is being spent here because that's the highest and best use of his time right now. And everyone gets that signal that Victor thinks this meeting is really important. And then around 10:30 or 10 o'clock, say it opened at like 8:30 or 9, and then around 10:30 or 11, Victor leaves for an hour, and then people have lunch at 12 o'clock, and around 12:30 he comes back into the room when everyone's having their lunch, and he continues to enjoy the early part of the afternoon. But then he leaves because he realizes that his high authority is going to suck all the air out of the room, so he wants to give people space to actually speak their mind. But he's been present and people know that he thinks a meeting is important. Then he closes the meeting with everyone else, and the next day he issues his reflections on what happened that day and what he thinks is great and what he thinks is not so great, and what we can do and what we cannot do in the next 90 days. And then he also calls out some people by name who showed up very large in the open space in terms of their contributions and their engagement and their overall presence in the meeting. And he invites them to champion some of the causes and some of the concerns and issues that they brought up during their open space sessions. That is going to energize the company in a way that is just almost impossible any other way. And if this is done every 3 months, say Victor stood up and he said, how many people have ever experienced an open space meeting? And 10% of the people hold up their hands and the other 90% are just sitting there wondering what the heck open space is. And he says, this is an open space meeting. I believe you're going to enjoy it. It's really something. And if you do enjoy it, understand that in 90 days, after we process the proceedings and do some of the action steps that those proceedings are suggesting, in 90 days, we're going to do this again, and it's going to be a kind of retrospective on the last 90 days. Everyone's going to realize, okay, Victor's going to kind of inviting us to go through something here. And it helps people to do 3 things. When he announces that it's going to happen again in 90 days, and he invites people's participation in that, 3 things happen. People will suspend their disbelief. They will pretend that what we're going to do in the next 90 days could actually work. And they're going to act as if we could actually make progress in the next 90 days. So what Victor has successfully done there is he has lowered everyone's anxieties and fears and increased their engagement in the process of positive change. Okay, so people can't learn when they're afraid. You know, when I was in university, I deferred all of my hard courses until the 4th year. And then one semester I had the second calculus class, the second physics class, data structures. I had a foreign language, second level of foreign language. It was like, I was scared to death I was gonna just get all D's and C's. And then I realized I'm afraid. And if I'm afraid, I can't learn anything. I need to look at the subject matter as my friend and not my enemy. And then I'm going to be better off. Okay. And that helped me to relax. And this is what, you know, in this scenario where Victor invites you into a whole group meeting and tells you another one's going to happen in 90 days, and he welcomes your participation. This is going to lower your fears, lower your anxieties, allow you to pretend that what's happening could actually work, act as if we can make progress, and suspend your disbelief long enough to actually learn something, okay? Because agile transformation in general is very triggering of people. And when you trigger people and make them afraid, nothing good can happen, okay? So this is the thing that Leadership Invitation brings. Now, there's one thing I want to do now, if it's okay with you, is I want to show you a 2-minute video. Can I do that? So I'm going to show this 2-minute vid, and what I want to do with it is I want to give you the context. The context is, this is an executive that I worked for who wanted to make serious culture changes in his company. He was trying to promote 10 core values, and it was starting to stall because he had been doing all this imposition stuff for about a year. And he describes this story about how he crashed into this open space concept at a conference. It was a conference that we did in Boston. And then after that conference, the leadership team used open space to actually solve a difficult management impasse problem. They did a one morning open space in 3 hours. They got 25 leaders in the room, and they solved that problem. And that's when, boom, it clicked. This fellow has 900 people under the span of his authority, a global engineering organization of a public USA company. And he tells his story. Now, this is a very command and control-y kind of guy, okay? But he's very, very smart. So he was open to anything that would help, you understand? So he was scared to death in the beginning of the whole open thing. And then he describes happiness and joy. After this, we did 8 open spaces around the world. I did 5 of them all over the world. He sent me all over the world to address these 900 people. We did 3 of them online. Listen to his story. I want you to hear his story, because it's really quite amazing. It's just 2 minutes long. Okay, can everyone see this? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
We're in Burlington, Massachusetts. You're at Nuance Communications. My name's Jake O'Leary. I run an R&D organization that's just over 900 people globally. We produce AI, speech, virtual assistants, and other capabilities. A little over a year ago, we started a journey of redefining our culture. I saw that we got to a point where our success and progress started to come to a bit of a halt. And I just so happened to crash into the open space concept, attending an event. Obviously, culture takes a long time to manifest and change within an organization. The light bulb just went on that in open space as a way to drive this cultural transformation, to create the culture that we're looking for. And from the moment we did it, everyone was engaged and it just worked out. It was positive. I think people were surprised. I was surprised, to be honest with you. The moment that we got past the open circle, the moment that the board started to fill up and people started to submit topics, and then we started to see what I consider healthy topics and engagement was there, I immediately, obviously, I felt some sense of relief. And then by the wrap-up circle, at the end of the event, and after having to attend it personally, hearing people's closing comments, it turned to me in terms of happiness and joy. It was a success, and it was a success in that here was a new approach to solving problems and bringing people together to collaborate and share ideas. And this new approach yielded benefit. The people that participated in it saw value. The people that participated in it contributed. And I then started to build more champions for this open space idea ultimately. And with each open space event, and as each leader sat through those events, one after the next, I kept hearing about the success stories, and it just repeated itself each and every event. That was the moment I knew we had something special. And so you had to kind of embrace the fact that in this situation, let the organization lead the way forward and let leaders kind of rise up to drive things forward. It's extremely important not just to show the organization that leadership cares, leadership's present, leadership's just as engaged, but I actually think it's critically important for the leader themselves.
So there you go. That's what you can have happen in your company as well. Now, Victor and I have arranged some classes. One is September 10th and one is on August 16th. The class is the 8 patterns of open business agility. It has everything to do with leadership invitation. It teaches those 8 patterns that I showed you. And those are supporting patterns that will allow your invitation program to be successful. Okay. So I hope you'll consider attending that class. We'll give you, you're receiving a 50% off, half price discount code, and that'll be in a follow-up email to you. And I hope that you'll consider coming to the class on September 10 or August 16th. And it's been my pleasure to serve you with this presentation today. I hope it opened your eyes, and we have a few more minutes for questions, maybe 5 minutes, Victor. How shall we proceed from here?
Yes, thanks, Daniel. Again, amazing session as always. So yes, we can open up to the floor. If anyone has any questions for Daniel, this would be the time. And again, an amazing topic. I'm sure it's been very triggering, and we have things that we would like to talk to him about. So please. Oh, Karthik.
Yeah, one question is about the link to that video, and I'm going to put it right in the chat for you. Here's the link to that video, and then there's also some other videos in the whole thing here. I'm going to give you the whole. Here's another link where that video is found, and there's other resources here. Okay, so open at Nuance is what you just saw, and then the video link, there's other videos that are there as well that you can use to give to your own executives as you discuss this with them, okay? Yeah, so any questions, I'm happy to take them. Yeah, Al, please.
Yeah, I'll ask the classic COVID time question. How have you found, or is there anything in particular that you found you've had to change now that pretty much everyone is working remotely when you're addressing sort of an open space approach or invitation approach?
Yes. I teach a class called How to Teach Online. It's really about how to communicate online, how to manage and lead online. One thing that I've had to change is I'd have to be much more conscious of the camera as a leader. You need to pay attention to, what's going on with the camera. So for example, right now you can see I'm using my hand and I'm also very close to the camera. And that's so you can actually get access to my face and pick up the nuanced meaning of what I'm saying. People only have access to you from, your collar up. So it's your face and it's your hands. So I've been working on that, and you actually have a superpower that's available to you now. I am 6'4", almost 6'5", so it's like I've descended from a race of giants or something. And of course, that's a kind of advantage in the world when we're face to face, but it means nothing in this world. So someone who's 4'6" is on an equal level playing field with everyone else in the world, okay? And this is especially important for people who do not believe that they're powerful type people, right? You can project authority and power across the video very, very easily. you know, like, and this is an adjustment that I've made. When I make a point, and you've seen me do it a couple times already, I'm going to move in on the camera like this real slow, and I'm going to give you full access to my face, and I'm going to look right at the camera like I'm speaking directly to you. I'm going to make my point. I might use my hands a little bit, and then I'm going to move out to signal that I'm done talking. Now, this is a kind of superpower that you can acquire, right? And it's in this class, How to Teach Online. There's 100 things in that class, the do's and don'ts, 100, like, you know, 75 do's and 25 don'ts in an 8-hour class will make you a very powerful communicator across the online medium and enable you to be more effective in your job and to advance your agenda, your ideas, your vision for things by being a good communicator. So that's a very important aspect of this online medium. The one other thing I would say about this is that the check-in and check-out that you would normally have in a face-to-face meeting is super essential online. If if you're going to have an effective meeting online, if someone arrives a few minutes late, it's important as a protocol to pause, get them properly checked in, and then continue. Have you ever been in a meeting where the person comes in late and you know they're there and they know they're there, but everyone's ignoring that they're there? And it just kills the energy, right? No, that's a human being. Get them checked in, make them a full first-class member of the meeting, and then proceed forward. So those are 2 ways that I've adjusted. And then I'm going to make a note here to send you. Mark Sheffield and I have published under open source license a set of guidelines and a checklist and procedures for doing open space meetings online. So, you know, we give that away in our open space class. And I'm happy to give it to you. You don't have to come to our class to get that. And if you have questions, you can just ask me about it, you know, and I'm happy to help you. Okay.
I'd like to thank you very much for that, because it's always these sort of little tips about how you help to build a bridge and engagement with people and give the subtle cues about how you're communicating that help to build teams in a space.
It's super important. Like, you can tell, like, I'm not like in America, we'd say, if I was going to express that I'm not young, I would say I'm no longer a spring chicken. I'm not a spring chicken, right? I'm an older, you know, guy. I have grandchildren and stuff, you know, and I'm looking a little bit old, right? Big deal. What people want access to your eyes. They want access to your face. Give them access to your eyes and your face so they can actually understand what you're talking about. And then use your hands effectively when you're doing enumerations. You've probably seen me say, do this a couple times, thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. That's so I can be easily understood. And this is creating an opening to get your ideas across. All of a sudden, if you're willing to play to the camera, in 1980, there was a book called High Tech, High Touch. By a guy named John Naisbitt. The book was called Megatrends by this guy, John Naisbitt. And he coined the phrase high tech, high touch. And he made a prediction that we would all be connected and that the connections would be over technology and that the technology would be very isolating and we'd be more isolated than ever, even though we were connected. And he said, for every technological tool you use, you have to jack up the human factor. Otherwise, you're going to be lost in translation. That's the entire premise of the class, How to Teach Online. So if you want to go and look at that or learn about the classes that I teach, I'm going to put the schedule in right here into the chat for you. And you can just kind of graze or browse my other classes and consider coming to them. I know we're out of time. We're already a minute over, Victor. So I want to hand it over to you for a smooth landing.
Oh, thanks, Daniel. Well, I'm conscious Debashis has raised his hand for a bit, so I'm not sure if
I'm happy to stay. I'm happy to stay if the others want to stay to listen, but maybe you want to create space for people who need to go.
Yes.
They can gracefully exit.
Yes, thank you. So the recording for this session will be posted again on the Agile Singapore YouTube channel. So if you need to go now, feel free to drop off and you can catch up on the video later. But thank you again for making time to attend this session. It's amazing to have you and to have Daniel here today to share his incredible knowledge and experience in this area. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm happy to stay and take a few questions now. Yeah.
Sure. So Daniel, this is Debashish. I have a quick question for you. I really liked your handout where you said something about imposing self-organization as a contradiction of terms.
Yeah.
Now, I was just,
Yeah, this one right here.
yeah, that one. I like that a lot. So that set me thinking, and I was just wondering to get some reaction from you. Do you think Scrum as a framework imposes self-organization? Because that is a complaint I've received from some teams, which are saying that we have no experience self-managing, self-organizing, and tomorrow you tell us to be self-organized. We don't know what to do. We don't really know how to function. So I've received that feedback from some of the members in when we do these clinics with them. So when I saw your slide, it really I connected with that, and I wanted to get some reaction from you on that one.
Sure. Here's my reaction. Here's some quotes from the book, The Power of Scrum by Jeff Sutherland. Okay. Here's some direct quotes right out of the book. Here they are. You know as well as I do, if the team doesn't want to use a methodology, it won't work. Let them make their own assessment. Okay, that's the first quote. And then second quote is, a leader's responsibility is to make it clear to the team that they should be in control of their own work processes. Okay. Now that's Jeff Sutherland talking. Now, if you are willing to invite people to do Scrum and not impose it on them, then you are not imposing self-organization and you will be successful in self-management. That's my answer. But if you mandate it, then the people like me, the people like you, who don't like being pushed around, who are in software because they want a sense of control and a sense of progress, and because they can control that closed environment of the code, right? When you're in the code, you're in a creator space. I mean, you are judge, jury, and executioner. You are the authority as a programmer. So people who program are inherently possessed of a strong need for control. And people are messy and random, and code is clean and predictable. Okay, so now we're going to take to an audience of people with a very strong need for control. We're going to push them around and tell them what to do. How is that actually going to go, do you think, huh? Not going to go good at all. That's the answer. But if you invite them, like Jeff Sutherland said in these quotes directly out of his book, right? Let them make their own assessment. In other words, let them decide. Make it clear that they should be in control. There it is. You see it? So that's my answer.
Thanks, Daniel.
That helps. Oh, you want me to go? I mean, I could tell you how I really feel. You want me to lay it on thicker and heavier? Okay. Let's do that together. I'm going to go to the Scrum guide now. I'm going to go Scrum guides because that's where the stuff is found.
While you pull that out, there's also a second part to that quote that you had there that I liked, which is the second bit of show them how to do it. Because it's one thing to sort of tell people or let them know, but you also help to lead them where it is.
Of course, but because they're authorizing that leadership, not because you're pushing it on them, because they asked you. Okay, so Jeff Sutherland has what's called it's called shock therapy. As an essay on shock therapy, it's like from 10 years ago. Shock therapy is where you just go through the process of Scrum for 2 iterations in the canonical form, and they just do what you tell them. Okay. That works great if they all decide that they're willing to do that with you. So when I coach, I do that. I say, listen, here's what I tell them. I say, look, if you really want to get good at this, I mean, I can show you how to be really, really good at producing twice the quality and twice the volume of what you're doing now. I could show you how to do it without any extra effort at all. Would you like to learn how to do that? Most of them say yes. And then I go like this. you're gonna have to suspend your disbelief and pretend that everything I say is true for 1 month, 2 iterations of 2 weeks. You're just gonna just pretend that this can work, act as if, and suspend your disbelief, and I'll take you through something. But you can't argue with me. When the month is over, we can argue about whatever you want, but for 1 month, we go through this together, and I lead. And I show you what it really looks like to do this properly. And yeah, a lot of points along the way, we can have discussions and debates and make changes, but you commit for a month, and I'll show you something amazing, and you'll be amazing when the month is over. Who wants to do that? And then I take them through it. Okay, now check this out. Every good game is like every great invitation, right? It has opt-in participation, right? These are the 4 properties of a good game. Every good game has these properties. Every crappy game doesn't. Okay? Now, check this out. Here's the Scrum Guide. Look at what it says on page 1 on the cover of the Scrum Guide. Look at this. Scrum is a game. Good games have opt-in participation. Crappy games don't. Teams have to want to do Scrum. Otherwise, it doesn't work. One more thing I'm going to say about this. I mean, I could tell you how I really feel if you want me to. It's a joke in America, right? I'm going on and answering the question like 17 different ways, and now I'm asking you if you want to know how I really feel. Most pilots we work with willing teams that actually want to try the thing in the pilot, right? We wouldn't do pilot with unwilling teams. Why would that be stupid? What's one reason? Yeah.
The classic one of the #1 reason for any project to fail is lack of stakeholder engagement. And if they don't have any skin in the game, they don't care if it falls.
Exactly. And we're going to invest in a pilot. Yeah, that's one reason why it would be dumb, or like I said, stupid. And there's other reasons, right? So here's what happens. In the pilots, they're always successful. I think my hypothesis is pilots are successful because of willing teams. We use willing teams to de-risk and reduce the risk. And then what we get is, success. And then we have organizational amnesia. We go, let's scale it now. And then we just push it on the organization. Dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. So there you go. Any other questions I can take? I'm happy to take them. I sense we might be at the beginning of the end here. Maybe we're in the middle of the end.
Yep, I'm conscious we are 10 minutes over, but Daniel has graciously agreed to take more questions, so please do.
Yeah, Peter?
Can I venture something that is maybe a tad negative in this aspect? What if invitation and we invite the wrong type? We introduce some toxicity into a group or a team. It happens, right?
I didn't really get the question. Could you say it a different way?
Okay, what if we invite the wrong type of people, or we get something that is not that desirable?
Oh,
and we
that's
see
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in one open space that I did in one company, this guy stands up and he goes, the theme was like, how can we improve with Agile or something like this? And he holds up his session. He goes, my session is company stock. When are we going to get some? When are we going to get stock options? That's my session. When are we getting company stock? It was a totally off-topic thing, and there was a lot of cheering, and a lot of people were at that session, and it was sort of a problem. It's leadership's privilege and duty to set the boundaries and guardrails, okay? So what I often do, ahead of an open space, is I do a kind of fishbowl called the authority circle exercise. And that's where the big bosses sit in the inner circle and everyone else sits in the outer circle. And there's one blank seat with the big bosses called the hot seat. And then they discuss 4 or 5 issues that are on the wall. Someone like Gretel or Al would facilitate that. And then, you know, each issue has 2 phases. The first phase is the executives talk, everyone listens, and we're like eavesdropping on authority. And then in the second phase, the hot seat is open and anyone from the outer ring can come in and go into that inner circle and raise an issue or a concern or have a comment about the topic. And that tends to signal sort of like what executive leadership is willing and unwilling to do, what they care about, what they don't care about, what they're afraid of, what they're not afraid of. And then we can move into the open space from there. And everyone has a pretty good sense of what's going to be in and what's going to be out without explicitly naming it like a set of rules or constraints. People can listen and get a general sense of what the leadership team cares about and thinks about. And that's the way that I do it. So I also coach leadership to immediately address those things the next day in an email to the whole group. So the executive would discuss company stock. We're not doing it this year. We might not even do it next year. That's just the reality, you know. And of course, this all requires preparation of the leadership team to know what's going to happen in open space. One of the things in open space is be prepared to be surprised. People are going to speak their mind. That guy spoke his mind. It was on the hearts of a lot of the developers because they wanted they wanted participation in the success of the company. That's what they wanted. So we all have to be adults and address the adult issues and not pretend that we're children.